with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all walks of life in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental and emotional perspective. Today on the Grit with Wisdom podcast, I had the pleasure of interviewing Tori Wood. Tori is a mountain biker based in Squamish and is an incredible fit for this show because she not only shreds on a bike, but she's also completing her master's degree in psychological counseling. Tori, having picked up riding only 5 years or so ago, wasted no time and truly embraced the sport by diving headfirst into the challenges. She recently rose to mountain bike stardom as a contestant in season 2 of the Pink Bike Academy, where she competed in her first ever race in front of countless people online and trackside. She went on to become a fan favorite as she approached each challenge with her trademark grit and determination. We get into all kinds of interesting topics during our conversation, including her gymnastics background and the lessons she learnt, good and bad, from the ultra-competitive environment. We also talk about her mental health workshops and how they help other mountain sports enthusiasts by providing some much-needed awareness and tools. And of course, we dive deep into how some of these tools help her on the bike and how they can help you on the bike as well. With no further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Tori Wood. Hey, Tori, welcome to the Grit with Wisdom podcast. Absolutely stoked to have you here today. How are you doing?
Yeah, hey Jake, thanks for having me. Doing pretty well. Pretty excited for a chat.
Yeah, fantastic. So we were just chatting there. You're kind of taking it easy today after a couple of big days out on the slopes.
Yeah, winter kind of came back, so had to just roll with it and get the skis out of storage for a couple days.
Yeah, we're just having a laugh, saying what a good problem it is to have. Hey, it's like, we can't ride bikes. Yes, I'll ski.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to be able to switch between the two.
Yeah, good stuff. That's fantastic. So I wanted to start here today with a really broad, open-ended
Mm.
question. You're welcome to take it any which way. But I want to ask, what is your why when it comes to riding mountain bikes?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to start with because I find that my why sometimes changes depending on how I'm feeling and where I'm at in my life. But for the most part, just enjoyment, just the feeling of biking is definitely my first and foremost reason for going biking. The exercise for sure. For me, the exercise is pretty meditative and being outside and connecting to nature. That's pretty important for me. That's kind of how I get a lot of my thinking done and find a lot of like peace and tranquility from that. And I guess socializing as well. It's a pretty social sport. And so sometimes if I'm feeling really tired and maybe I'm not super stoked on actually biking, I'll just go because I want to hang out with my friends.
Totally,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Can totally relate there. Biking is just such a great tool, isn't it, for all aspects of health, from the physical health to the mental and emotional health, and even, the spiritual health, being out there in nature as well. I love it. So you're originally from Melbourne as well, I believe, down in Australia. I'd love to talk a little bit about what it was like kind of growing up there, maybe some of the different sporting pursuits you had before moving here to BC.
I was born in Melbourne, and from a young age, I started doing gymnastics competitively. And yeah, Melbourne's definitely a pretty different vibe. I went to a private school and definitely didn't really fit into the city vibes. And yeah, ended up not really. I left Melbourne when I was 12 after I quit gymnastics and wasn't really in a great place when I left, just from going to private school and quitting gymnastics and not really feeling like I fit in with my peers and stuff there. So yeah, it was kind of a hard time in my life
Yeah,
growing
that
up
must have been
there, to
tough
be honest.
having so much change all at once. Like, not only
Hmm.
have you quit, what your life was based around on your hobby, changing schools, moving countries. Like, wow, that's a lot for a young child.
Yeah, like I think the quitting gymnastics was the first thing, was the first big change, and then
Mm,
going, yes, changing schools, and then starting at this school, and then I was bullied when I was 12, and then the opportunity, my parents split up, and then the opportunity came up to move to Canada with my mom, and I was just like, sign me up. I'm ready to get out of here and ready to change it
yeah,
up. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
I'm sorry to hear about that experience, but it's really cool to hear that things did change for the better and you made the move here to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it sucked at the time, but ultimately, it brought me out here. So, well, it brought me to Ontario, but
Okay. Yeah, like
yeah,
a little stepping stone there. I love it.
exactly. Yeah, so I was in Ontario between the ages of 12 and 19, and when I graduated high school, I moved to Whistler. So,
Okay,
kind of
fantastic.
got to a point where I was like, not quite stimulated enough here in Ontario. I'm probably going to get into a bit of trouble if I don't find a more stimulating environment. So yeah, I
Totally.
moved to
Yeah,
Whistler for.
putting yourself out into the mountains is certainly a good way to keep away from all that other stuff, right?
I mean, I definitely got into a bit of trouble when I moved to Whistler as well, but that's all part of growing up, isn't
Totally. Yeah,
it?
absolutely agree. Um, so, moving out here to Whistler, getting involved in the mountain life, I take it you picked up skiing or snowboarding, straight away. When did you actually start getting yourself on a mountain bike and getting interested in that side of things?
Yeah, so I started mountain biking about 5 years ago. So I've been in BC for 11 years. And yeah, I primarily just skied before that. And then summers, I was working because I was in school as well. So I was just working, kind of hanging out. And yeah, decided that I needed something a little bit, I needed a summer thing because I was kind of I was just feeling like I was lacking passion and interest and just needed to pick up something new to stay stimulated. And a friend of mine, she got a mountain bike, and she was like, "You should probably get one too, because we spent most of our time together." And I was like, "Okay." And so just bought a mountain bike, and I really, I kind of I told myself, like, you're gonna suck at this, and that's okay,
Hmm.
because you're doing it for fun. You're not doing it to be the best. Like, it's okay. It's going to be a learning process, and you're going to have to learn to be okay at being bad at something.
Yeah,
And
that's a really good point. And I'm curious, I'm just going to cut in there. Was that kind of
yeah.
mindset or that philosophy, was it difficult to adopt when you're coming from this gymnastics background where you're, set on being the best, on winning competitions?
Yeah, definitely. And even, it kind of takes over all aspects of my life, I think. Well, it did. And yeah, just kind of coming to that understanding and being like, you can't be the best at everything, but that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. It was a bit of a
Hmm.
test, I think. And I guess I'd had people try and get me out mountain biking before that, and I always just said no, no, because I knew I would be bad, and just wasn't really, yeah, willing to kind of go through the process of learning something. And then yeah, it got to a point where I was like, you kind of just you have to try new things, you have to keep it interesting, and you have to challenge yourself.
Yeah, totally. It can take so much courage as an adult to put yourself back in that beginner stage where you suck. You're spending so much
Yeah.
time on the ground if it's a snow sport, or maybe you're grazing your knees and your elbows every second ride on a mountain bike. It can be so tough. Um,
Mm.
but I'm curious, like those first kind of few weeks on the bike as you're starting to put yourself out there and pick it up, how did you feel?
Oh, yeah, I felt pretty great. I loved it. but I was crashing all the damn time. Like I was literally going out and coming home just missing skin everywhere. And probably, I think the gymnastics, having the gymnastics training made me quite resilient when it came to crashing. And also, sort of, I knew enough about how to fall so that every time I fell, it wasn't really a big deal. It'd be a little bit scary, but for the most part, I was fine. And so I was like, I can keep doing this. And I think mountain biking is definitely a sport that rewards you the more risks you take. I think, or maybe not risks. I don't think that's a good way to say that. I think it rewards you the braver you are. And the more you try things, and then you kind of build that sense of self-efficacy and your confidence, and then you kind of keep building off that and you gain momentum. And so, yeah, I was going out. I was just mostly going out on solo rides by myself, just trying to get the gist of it, trying to teach myself how to do it. But yeah, I was crashing so much. But
Wow.
yeah.
It's a rad story, and it's so cool hearing about the gymnastics background and how that plays into learning to ride a mountain bike as well. Like the two sports are pretty different from each other,
Mm,
but it's cool to hear some of those skills like resilience and confidence or courage that helped you in your mountain biking as well.
yeah.
So I think from an outside perspective, it seems like that background, that discipline, that resilience has had a lot of play in you picking up the sport really quickly and becoming
Mm,
quite good at it.
mm. Yeah, I think just like from from such a young age, training in a sport that does require so much discipline and determination, it's kind of just the way that my brain works around sports and activities. So, yeah, I think it was really, I was very cognizant of that though when I picked up mountain biking because I didn't want to ruin the sport because I did enjoy it so much. So I was like, okay, like make sure this is still just fun first and foremost, and you're not pushing yourself to, be the best. And it's kind of why I hesitated for getting into racing for quite a while because
Mm.
after I quit gymnastics, I told myself I'd never do anything competitive again because I just had such a kind of not great experience with that sport.
Yeah, there's some great self-awareness there, and I guess was it the pressure of the competition that kind of drove you away from gymnastics in the end?
Yeah, the pressure of competition and then the self-sabotaging thoughts and behavior if I didn't kind of live up to my standards. And, gymnastics is like the standard is perfection, right? Like that's kind
Mm.
of what you're aiming for. And if for whatever reason you don't meet that standard, then there's a lot of self-blame, a lot of self-sabotage, like you did this, and this wrong. And I find that kind of mindset really stuck with me even after the sport, even after I quit the sport. And so I've tried to be really aware of that not happening again in mountain biking and being okay with not being perfect. And I think mountain biking's cool because it is a sport that it's really, really hard to do everything perfect. Like there's so many variables and there's so many moving parts. And it's sometimes it's just utter chaos, which is like kind of why I love it so much.
Totally.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like, hearing about, how you've had this, pretty high level of self-awareness coming into the new sport, and you're like, hey, I want to keep this fun. I don't want to get caught up, riding for the wrong reasons, and in that cycle of self-doubt and negative self-talk. I know, that stuff it's dangerous, isn't it? The kind of the more we feed those thoughts, the more they hang around and the stronger they get. So
Yeah.
you're gonna say something there? No?
Oh, yeah, I
Something.
was just gonna say like the negative self-talk, it's just self-perpetuating.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So Kind of fast forward into the last couple of years, you've been riding for what, 3 or 4 years just for fun with your friends, making a really conscious effort not to, get too competitive or caught up in that side of things. What was kind of the defining factor when you decided to sign up or send an application into the Pink Bike Academy?
Yeah, I guess I was going through a bit of a transition period in my life and coming out of a serious relationship and then kind of just feeling like I needed to start being a bit more courageous and saying yes to things and taking chances. And I had a friend who told me that he was like, you should apply for this. And I kind of laughed and shook it off and was like, there's no way I would do that. And then eventually I kind of just was like, you know what have I got to lose? Worst case scenario, like they say, you don't get in, and it's like whatever, no harm. So made this application with my friend, a little shred it, and then sent it in. And then before I knew it, I had an interview, and then they were like, "You're going," and I was like, "I've never actually raced before." Like,
That's the crazy thing. Yeah.
so had a couple moments of panic, just not being like, what am I doing? Almost pulled out because I was concerned about the like putting yourself in the public eye and being judged and critiqued. And I was getting like a lot of, memories from gymnastics coming up as well. But, I was like, this could also be a really good opportunity. And it's not every day you get a chance to go on a reality TV show. So if anything, it'll just be a good story and a good experience. Yeah.
Totally. And it has turned into one, big ups to you. It takes, I think, so much courage to put yourself out there, so deeply, not only
Mm.
with, trying racing, which you've never done before on a mountain bike, but also, yeah, in the public eye on the most, popular news feed for mountain bikers. So that's awesome. And I know from doing a little bit of research, you kind of took these nerves and you put them to work. You did some really good preparation before you got into the academy. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I mean, uh, I've always kind of trained, I guess, but I started to train a bit more specifically for enduro and also just getting help on technique as well because I'd never had a lesson or, I'd like watched some YouTube videos and gotten pointers from friends. But yeah, I think I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in because that's kind of how I do things. So I connected with Jamie, my coach, Jamie Hill, and I was like, "Do you think you can help me?" And this was like a couple months before, and she was like, "I can try." And so yeah, worked with her for a little bit before that, and then did a lot of preparation because I guess the season before they did a bunch of wrenching on their bikes and some other challenges. And so I tried to learn as much as I could about, working on your bike and, doing brake bleeds and like installing derailleurs and changing tires and whatever. And turns out they didn't do any of that in the second season, but it was still
Okay.
a good way to spend my time.
Yeah,
But
totally good skills to have.
yeah, but I think, yeah, all in all, I just kept riding my bike and was just trying to prepare mentally, I think, for being on camera and
Hmm.
trying to think about how I was going to speak without. I was really nervous about saying the wrong thing because I can literally take whatever you say and like put that in the show. So I was really nervous about that.
Yeah, that's super nerve-wracking.
Mm.
That's really cool to hear, all the different aspects you went about it, like preparing, how to be on camera, how it's going to feel, doing the mechanical side. And I'm curious, the work you did there with Jamie from Hilltop. What were some of the biggest takeouts for you that you learned in doing that coaching?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of just started right at the beginning because like I said, I'd had no coaching before. And so we kind of just worked on like body position and that was like a big one for me because, I'd been riding for 3.5 years, just like I feel like my body position had kind of become pretty solidified, and so it took a long time to kind of like change that. And so we kind of just focused on that mostly, but Jamie also really helped me with just how to kind of think about yourself as an athlete and how to approach racing and the mindset and how to kind of focus on you and what you can control and to kind of black out all the noise around you. And she always says like stay in your bubble, which means, don't compare yourself to people around you. And yeah, focus on what you're doing, focus on your breath, focus on thinking about the preparation that you've had and, kind of pumping yourself up and feeling good about yourself. So I'd say
Wow.
that's kind of, yeah.
What's some awesome advice. I got to get Jamie on the show. Um,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
love that. And, it's really cool too, talking about, you know, being relatively new to mountain biking and having like a fresh slate when it comes to coaching and working on, the foundation of all foundations, body position. Because
Mhm.
I think, doing a little bit of coaching myself, that's something we never stop working on as riders, no matter how good
Mm.
we get. So really cool to hear that like that's the number one thing that helped you going into the academy there.
Yeah, and I think connecting with Jamie has been probably one of the most pivotal parts of my journey in mountain biking. Just she's she's not just a coach. She's kind of, yeah, she's a mentor, and um I idolize her because she's such a badass, and we have a very similar background. She was a competitive gymnast as well, and I think in terms of being on the same page, I think she really understands a lot of the other stuff that I go through. Um, you know, having an eating disorder when I was younger, and she can kind of empathize with that because of gymnastics kind of breeds that sort of mentality that you have to be really small to be successful. And some of the like core beliefs that have stuck with me from gymnastics, she can empathize with and work through with me when it comes to training and trying not to overtrain. And so yeah, I think it's been a really cool relationship with her.
Yeah, it's fantastic. What a great mentor and like friend by the sounds of it to have on your
Mm.
team. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I wanted to ask, once you got into the Pink Bike Academy, if you have any kind of highlights, like was there a favorite competition within that academy that you really enjoyed or a favorite moment that sticks out to you?
I feel like I mean, I only did two challenges, so uh I think just the experience of meeting everyone was really cool, and I think the environment was really fun. There was lots of really cool people there, and I think one of my favorite moments was, I was so nervous before the first race. I was like the most nervous I'd been in a really, really long time. And I was just trying to do everything to calm my nerves and be like, just don't blow it. Just like do your thing, just be confident, and it was definitely not some of my best riding on that first race run, but it was clean. And but that feeling when I got to the bottom and I was like, oh my God, I did it. Like
Yeah,
I was like, that was pretty sick.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good feeling. I loved the FTP test was, yeah, I like doing that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
being in the pain cave. So yeah.
Sounds like good times. So when you're sitting there, maybe on the start line to a race, you're feeling all the nerves. I know you've got a couple of tools that you'll, implement to try and get yourself into an optimal state
Yeah.
for riding. I'd
Mm.
love if we could dive into those for a second.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on how I'm feeling. Like sometimes I'll be almost like too amped up
Hmm.
and too kind of like agitated, or not agitated, but yeah, like nervous, and I'll feel like my palms sweating and my heart's racing. And so in that sense, if I'm on the start line, I just focus on doing some like box breathing and some grounding techniques to just kind of like, if I find the start line is a really good place to have all these intrusive thoughts and be like, oh, well, what if you like don't make it up this climb, or what if you, you know, mess up this move, and what if you blow it on, like, what if you do something dumb in the flats? And it can really just be a place where those negative thoughts just start going out of control. And I think at that point you kind of just need to empty your mind and try and compartmentalize all those thoughts and be like, okay, you know, recognize that they're there, but sort of like put them in a little box in your head and like lock them up, and then try and just recenter and breathe, and maybe just kind of go over some self-affirmation. So I find that that is kind of my best tool is, yeah, the self-affirmation and the breathing. And I sometimes I'll have specific memories of when I've been riding my bike and I've just felt amazing. Maybe it's just, you know, cruising on the home trails or bombing down a line with my friends or whatever it is, and just have those like one or two memories of just feeling really good on my bike and kind of tapping into those before I drop in, because yeah, that kind of builds up your sense of confidence, and kind of even just like having that feeling and feeling, you know, like thinking, trying to remember what it feels like in your body when you just rail a corner and it's all like there and it's already firing for you before you drop in. So
Yeah, what a great toolkit. There's so much in there I'd love to unpack. And, you know,
mm,
so many great tools that I think listeners will be able to take out here and use in their own riding. But I love, you know, your last point there of taking yourself mentally back to a stage when you're feeling confident, you're having fun, you're in that
mhm,
good state. And, you know, you obviously know through your work, which we'll talk about a bit more in a second, that our body and our brain doesn't know the difference between a real event and an imagined event. So it's really cool, you know, kind of using that hack to visualize and imagine yourself in a great state where you're having fun, you're confident, you're feeling all these feelings you want to feel. And we can actually
mm,
start triggering those feelings again, right?
yeah, yeah. I think that's been probably one of the most beneficial tools that
I
that
love
I've
it.
used. But yeah, it can be
Yeah,
hard
no,
though. Like it can be hard to kind of, especially if you're super nervous. And yeah, and it's, I think the first thing is being able to kind of stop the flow of negative thoughts and the anxiety and stuff, because if that's still going on, then it's really hard to kind of get out of that and then apply more adaptive strategies. So
totally. Yeah, I agree. And do you find that breathing is kind of like the first point of call there?
yeah, the breathing is, because the breathing is, it's like a bottom up process. So it's like it calms down your sympathetic nervous system, and just helps you, yeah, like reset. And it kind of, because once your body is calmed down, your heart rate's slowing down, then that's sort of sending messages to your head, to your brain, that you're okay and like you're not in danger and everything's fine and you're good. And so once you can kind of calm yourself down, then that's when you can start to, you know, apply the other strategies.
Yeah, it's a fantastic explanation. And for those that aren't aware, the box breathing technique you mentioned there, how does that one work?
Yeah, box breathing, it's essentially just breathing in for 4 seconds and then holding your breath for 4 seconds, exhaling for another 4 seconds, and then holding your breath at the end of the exhale. And so it's 4 by 4 by 4 by 4, hence a box. And
Yeah,
that's probably one of the most basic breathing strategies. You can do it, you can even like draw your breath out longer and do it for, you know, like 5 by 5. Um, but I find that one, yeah, that's probably my go-to.
yeah, it's a great one. I love it. It's so simple, yet, you know, the
Hmm.
differences it can make on your state is so profound. And,
Hmm.
you know, I think a great one to do, especially if you're in an environment like a race start line or something like that, you've got lots of people around you, you can do that calmly to yourself and no one even notices. So really good tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah.
It kind of leads us into, you know, some of the other stuff you're doing when you're not on the bike. I wanted to chat a little bit here about the work you do as a psychological counselor and about the master's degree you're completing.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the last few months of doing my master's in counseling psychology, which has been, yeah, about a 3 year adventure for myself.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. And so I've started working with clients in the last 6 months, which has been kind of terrifying, but also really rewarding because, suddenly you're taking everything that you learn in school and then you're applying it in person. And so yeah, it's a little bit daunting, but I've found that I I think I've been building a specialization for myself in working with athletes and working with people that are struggling with depression and anxiety, as well as addiction and body image and disordered eating behaviors. But I've also just kind of been taking on everything that comes my way because I feel like it's a bit early to specialize too much, and I just want to get all the experience that I can. But I've found that working with athletes, and not even athletes, recreationalists, people that are into the outdoors and doing the activities that we do here in the West Coast, um, that's kind of been my niche for sure.
Oh, that's so rad. Such important work that you're doing there. And I'm curious, like, what was it that led you to choosing this career path and going down this track?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of touched on it a bit earlier with my past, but just going through and living, like being diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and anorexia when I was 12, and pretty much living from then until now dealing with those things, and having gone to countless counseling sessions and, inpatient treatment centers, and therapy has been a part of my life for a really long time, and it's made a huge impact. And I feel like the most influential people in my life and in that journey were mental health professionals. And so, in a way, I guess I feel like it's paying it forward a little bit, or, giving back to what helped me, but also just through the research and the studying, it's really helped me understand myself better. And I think my insights and what I've learned, if I basically, I think if I have the ability, or I think I might have the ability to help others who are struggling and who are suffering, then I need to do that. Because yeah, like there's so many people out there that are suffering, and it's yeah, it can be really bad for some people. And so I think that's where uh I wouldn't say it's like a calling, but I kind of just found my path here.
Yeah,
And
it definitely
yeah.
sounds like, the right path for you and the natural path. And it's so cool to hear that you are, being so generous and paying it forward, saying, hey, look, some of these tools and some of these, services that really helps you. Now you can kind
Yeah.
of learn about it and help other people as well. I love it.
Yeah, and it's, I don't I guess, like, you make it sound so altruistic and like, oh yeah, it's so selfless, but I mean, a big part of it is that it helps me too. Like, I get so much out of it. But yeah, I guess you can have both, right? Like, you can help
I agree.
others and you can help yourself, and I think one comes with the other. So
Yeah, yeah, I can kind of relate, from like a coaching or instructing
mm,
perspective. I get so much out of teaching someone how to ride a mountain bike. And they
yeah.
might be thanking me, but I'm like, no, thank you. This was awesome. So can relate.
Yeah.
And you're doing some work there at a local climbing center in Squamish.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been doing some seminars. The first one I did, yeah, I've been doing them in person at Ground Up Climbing in Squamish. And essentially, they're called mental health and mountain sports. And I've also been doing them online, virtually over Zoom, with people that aren't in the Sea to Sky, so that it can be kind of accessible to everyone. But the point is to kind of educate and enhance awareness and try to reduce stigma around mental health and mental illness, specifically about issues that we deal with in our communities of mountain bikers and skiers and climbers, kayakers, people who are into mountain sports. There's all these niche issues that everyone's experiencing, but not that many people are talking about. And so my point, yeah, is just to increase awareness and get people talking about this stuff, and talking with their friends about it, and to try and create a healthier mindset around these sports, to reduce injury, and also to just enhance mental health and enhance enjoyment in these sports. So
Totally. Yeah, it's so great. And I mean, like, enjoyment is the number one reason we all get on a bike or get on a climbing wall in the first place, right? It's so cool to hear, you're there offering the tools to help get back to that more often than not. And what would you say are some of kind of like the trending topics that you talk about in these events?
yeah, so I kind of did a bit of crowdsourcing because I had my own ideas about what I think needed to be discussed. The big ones, injury, and how to deal with injury when you've been taken out of the sport that you love, and often is so like encompassing of your lifestyle. There's so many negative psychological repercussions of that, and people struggle with their sense of identity, and there's like body image issues as well if you're unable to kind of exercise. And so that's a big one, like injury
Mm,
prevention, and also like how to recover from injury, and how to deal with the mental side of it. And I've done some information on overcoming fear and how to get your confidence back after crushing. And then FOMO has been a really big one. And
that's a good
pretty much,
one. Let's talk about
yeah,
FOMO.
yeah, love to talk about FOMO because it's such like it's kind of like a trending word, right? And I was pretty shocked to realize how much research has actually been done on FOMO, particularly around, adventure sports. And essentially FOMO is the feeling of anxiety because other people are having a pleasurable experience that you're not included in, and this feeling that you're not a part of like this group social experience that is like further enhancing the connection of the social network that you are like not being included in, so you're kind of like falling behind in that sense. And yeah, it can be pretty debilitating, and I think social media is definitely the major driving force of FOMO, and I think people know this as well.
Yeah.
But one of my main points for dealing with FOMO, the first one is to, yeah, put the phone down. If you're injured, or if you're at work, or if for whatever, maybe you like weren't invited on a group ride or whatever, um, is to just like put the phone down and notice what triggers those feelings of FOMO. And if it's seeing someone's story or a certain person's feed, you can unfollow, or if they're a friend, you can just mute it, and they don't know. And if they have a problem with it, then they're probably not the best person to be friends with anyways. But you can actually, you're in control of what you're exposed to on social media. And if there's stuff that is just consistently triggering anxiety and these feelings of FOMO, then just get rid of them. And even take a break from social media, like uninstall it. Just tell your friends, hey, I'm going off social media for a bit, especially if you're injured. Such can be such a good tool just to have a break. And then
Yeah.
also, I think another good point with FOMO is to kind of create your own plans and be be in control of your own plans. And if I think also reaching out to people and inviting people who, because if you're feeling FOMO, everyone's feeling FOMO.
Yeah.
And so
That's a
keeping
good
that in
point.
mind, yeah, and making people feel included, and taking the initiative to invite people and to reach out. But yeah, there's a lot. I could keep talking about FOMO
Yeah,
for a
there's
long
so much
time.
to it, but it's really interesting. It's something that hasn't been brought up on this podcast yet. But I
Mm,
think, you mentioning that there's so many aspects of that, like you mentioned, at the time when we may get an injury and we're, facing spending more time on the couch than usual, having a phone in
mm,
your hand with Instagram can be like a surefire way to get more FOMO.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's not just Instagram, right? Like it's Strava. Strava is a big one too because you see all the stats and you're like, wow,
mm,
they had a big day, and then you start to feel FOMO kind of causes, yeah, this negative self-talk as well of being like, oh, well, I wasn't invited, so they must not like me, or they must think that I'm a bad mountain biker, that I can't keep up. And it really just kind of starts this cycle of negative self-talk. And if you're not aware of it and you're not kind of in a space where you can intercept those negative thoughts, then it can definitely cause you to feel quite anxious.
for sure, yeah. And mountain sports is such a dangerous playground for people to experience FOMO. I
Hmm.
think like North Shore Rescue and organizations like this have been having record numbers of rescue because of people like seeing some photo up in the Alpine and going and doing it themselves because they want the same shot or they want the same YouTube video. So
Yeah.
I think it's so important to always ask yourself like, what is my motivation for doing X? Do I want to do it for me because I have the skills to do it and I think it will be fun, or am I doing it for some kind of external reason unconsciously?
Mm. Yeah, kind of touching on your first question, right? Like, what is your
Mm,
why? And, if your why for going out on a ride is because you want to feel included, and if you don't go, you're going to feel bad and like you're missing out, then that's not really a good reason to be going out on a ride when maybe you should be resting, because FOMO can actually cause burnout and overtraining. And if you just keep kind of going out on like whatever sport it is when maybe you should be sitting it out, then you might get injured, or you might make some poor decisions if you're struggling with fatigue. And so there's all these other repercussions that can happen from FOMO that kind of drive you to just keep doing the sport for the wrong reason. And so, yeah, really revisiting that why and making sure that your motivation is intrinsic and not external,
mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, like your motivation's coming from within, like you actually want
Hmm.
this thing rather than like you want it because it will make you look like X or it will get you X,
Yeah.
whatever. So you also mentioned that, one of the common themes of your clinics is talking about, crashes, injury, and setback. And I know this is a really common question I get from my audience, like, what do I do to try and avoid getting a mental block if I have a crash? I know sometimes I'll see people, have a pretty gnarly crash and I'll be like, I've just got to get up and do it again. I've just got to do it again because I don't want to get a mental block. Do you have any advice for someone in that situation?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because that used to be my most common approach. And I think that's from gymnastics as well, is like if you do something and you fall, you get up and you do it again right away before before you get that like fear setting in and the mental block setting in. But I think with mountain biking, it's super important to reflect on the crash and to understand why it happened. And sometimes it's just a freak accident and something just happens and you're like, I can't even tell you why that happened. And that can be almost scarier. But when you can sit back and be like, okay, you know what? I think I like hesitated here and it was a bit wet here and I applied too much back brake, and that's where it all went south. When you can break it down and understand why you crashed, it can help you go back. But I think sometimes once we crash, if it's a bad enough crash and you're rattled, I've definitely had times where I've gone back and tried it again right away, and this exact same thing has happened. And so I think it's like that's where the self awareness is super important, and the
Mm,
ability to sit down and to be like, okay, why am I going back up? Do I feel like I need to prove it to myself that I can do this? Do I need to feel like do I feel like I need to prove it to others that I can do this? And kind of think about that sense as well, but also yeah, understanding what kind of went in, like what were the variables that contributed to the crash.
Yeah, it's a really good way of looking at it, kind of breaking it down objectively rather than getting caught up in like feelings of like I'm bad, like God damn it,
Hmm.
I just should have like let go of the brakes or whatever, being like, okay, well, what went wrong? What can I do better next time? I
And
love
I
it.
think
So, oh, sorry,
well,
go
as
on.
it's really easy to, yeah, get like really down on yourself after you've crashed as well, because it shakes your confidence. And then you're kind of, I don't know, I've had rides where I've gone down and it's just affected my ability to ride the rest of the day, and it sucks because you feel, yeah, you're just not sure of yourself, and then you start hesitating more, you start breaking more, and then you start making more mistakes. And so I think for me a big thing, and especially in a race, because if you're doing multi-stage enduro and you crash, you can't really afford to let that ruin your day and ruin your confidence. And so you do just need to take a second just to like shake it off. And sometimes you're mid stage and you don't even have time to do that. And so a big thing for me has just been um, trying to like forget about the crash after it's happened, and to just try and like pump your tires back up as fast as you can, so to speak. And
Yeah,
so I've had crashes and I've gotten right back on my bike and been like, it's okay, Tori, you got this. Like, you love this. You're so good at this. Like, you're awesome. You and
that's
just
great.
try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds almost like filling your mind with other stuff so that the doubt, the fear, the negative self-talk can't seep in.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
it's like you got all the time in the world after the race to feel bad about your fall and whatever, but you've got to kind of be able to get over it pretty quickly when it counts.
Yeah, totally. And I love the analogy there of like pump your tires up, let's get going. It's like,
Yeah.
if we have a little slide out in a race run, we twist our bars, we, check our bike, and then we're straight back on. So it's like pays to do that mental check as well and be like, right, what do I need right now? Do I need some
Yeah.
affirmations? Do I need to do some breathing? Let's go.
Yeah, and I think I had a really good experience with one of my teammates, Ellie, in a race last year on the island, and she was ahead of me on a stage, and I was right behind her, and she goes down this rock roll, and she fell at the bottom of the rock roll and ended up in the bushes. And I was stressing out because I was like, oh no, I hope she's okay. Like, oh man, she's probably gonna be like super bummed that she fell. And I ended up passing her, and I just hear her giggling from the bushes, and it made me smile so much. And she's just like, I passed her, and she's just like, "Go, Tori!" Like, she's just giggling, and we got down to the bottom, and I told her, I was like, "You're my hero," because to be able to have a crash and then just, well, and she was like, well, what else are you gonna do? Like, you have to laugh. You just, you can't take it too seriously, and like can't go back in time and change it. So you just have to laugh and shake it off. And it just reminded me, yeah, it's like, don't take it too seriously. And if you do crash, just kind of be like, wow, that was really dumb. But, onwards.
Yeah, what a grounded attitude. And it is a good reminder, isn't it? Like the end of the day, we're there having fun riding bikes, but like none of it really matters anyway. It's just
No.
it's just a fun pursuit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, are you going to remember that crash in like 10 years? Well, maybe you might, but
But you
like,
might be laughing about it in 10 years
ex
rather than crying.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you kind of, touched on this notion of, sometimes, we might have a crash or do something silly, and then we'll kind of let that compound. It'll just keep happening as we finish going on down the trail. I often refer to it as like compound crashing. We'll just keep crashing in the same way again and again
Mm-hmm.
and again if we don't catch
Mm-hmm.
it. So do you have any advice for someone maybe in that situation where they just keep getting this doubt in the back of their mind, this hesitation? They know they can ride this stuff, but they just keep experiencing this block.
Yeah, I think a real important thing to do is to just take a break. If that's your mindset, and it's every time you ride you're having this self-doubt, and like that's not fun. right?
No.
And if you're not competing or racing, or it's not your job, then take a break. Just put the bike away, step away, try something else, like go hiking, go rock climbing, go, read a book by the lake or whatever. Because the more you try to battle with that self-doubt and you're just going out day after day, it's just going to build upon itself. And sometimes just having a break, having a reset, coming back to your why. And I think especially a big thing is if you're having a mental block, maybe it's because you've had a bad crash, right? And so you're shaking, your confidence is shook. So go back to the basics, go back to the trails where you feel like a hero, go back to, your favorite jumps or your favorite corners or your favorite rock rolls, and do those things to build your confidence back up. And make sure that you're in the right atmosphere as well. Like go back with people that you trust and people that you have a good time with. Like maybe that is not a good time to go out on these group rides where everyone's just sending it. um and so be really cognizant of that, and yeah, just kind of start back at the basics and start your progression from the beginning and build your way back up. I think can be a really systematic way of breaking it down, because if you go back to where you crash straight away, then you're just going to have those feelings of fear come right back at you, and you're going to be shutting down, and the self-talk is going to be, I can't do this, this is too hard, I suck, I'm a loser, I'm going to sell my bike. And so it kind of just like exacerbates from there. And so yeah, going back and just getting yourself feeling good again, no matter what it is, and dropping that expectation of being like, oh, you need to be writing the hardest stuff and sending it with the boys or sending it with the gals. No, just like go back to, yeah, like you said, your why. Go back to that, and yeah, just build that confidence back up.
Yeah, yeah, really wise words there. And it's funny, isn't it? Like we laugh about this stuff. It sounds so silly sometimes when we voice out loud, some of these crazy thoughts we all get in our own mind. Um,
Mm.
but at the end of the day, we all experience this stuff. And I think it's really good to be able to talk about it and laugh about it and feel like, hey, these are some of the tools that are available to deal with this. I don't have to keep experiencing this same crash over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think a real important thing is, yeah, voicing those negative thoughts and saying them out loud, because once you're able to say them out loud, you can kind of detach from them and
Mm.
externalize them. And it once you say it out loud, like I think I've said a couple times after I've maybe just had not a great ride, and I'm just like, I'm gonna sell my bike. I'm selling my bike. And then you kind of realize how it sounds, and you're like, wow, that's ridiculous.
You
Like
realize how
you're
crazy that
like,
is.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, you're like, I'm catastrophizing and being slightly, dramatic. But once you say it, then you get it out of your system, and then you're like,
Mm.
I'm not gonna sell my bike. Like, I love this. Why, like
Yeah.
I just had a bad day. It's all good.
Totally. Yeah, it's such a good point. And speaking of kind of like letting things go, getting them out of your head, I wanted to ask, what's your perspective on journaling? Do you do any yourself?
Yeah, I think I love journaling, and I think everyone thinks of like journaling, like sit down, dear diary, today, blah, blah, blah. But journaling can sometimes, a lot of my journaling is just like points, like note styles, and just like even just random words. And I've got like so many notes on my phone that's just kind of like reflections and maybe things that, yeah, like realizations or things that I've picked up from conversations or things that I've read that kind of get me started on a train of thought. And I think journaling, yeah, is super healthy. And also talking with friends and like having these conversations with your friends about your feelings and kind of opening up, because the one thing that journaling can't give you is empathy. Like
Yes,
it's
true.
like you're putting your feelings out there, but they're not really being validated or met with empathy unless you're able to kind of give that to yourself, right? Like kind of see your thoughts and be able to practice some self-compassion with yourself. But if you're able to open up to your friends and people that you trust and family, then that can really help as well. because then you do get the feedback.
Yeah, it's another really, really useful tool. And it's always cool talking to other people about journaling because, like you say, it's not always the traditional Dear Diary
Yeah.
full paragraph or whatever. Everyone does it a slightly different way. And I think that's the cool thing about it. I know for me, you mentioned there that writing in a journal, our journal's not really able to give us much empathy.
Yeah.
Something I like to do, to counteract that is always make myself, no matter how hard it is, no matter how bad my ride's been or my day's been, always think of three things that went well first.
Yeah.
Only then will I write about, what didn't go so well and what I want to do better next time.
Yeah, and you touch on a really good point is gratitude because a lot of the time, like I find it really hard to be negative when I'm thinking about what I'm grateful for. And
Mm,
so if you can kind of, I find that a lot of my journaling does end up with things that I'm grateful for. Because it's just, yeah, it's a really good reflection strategy. And another thing I was going to say is on the on the topic of, talking to your friends, and I think building yourself a really good community and support network is super important as well, not just for people in mountain biking, but every single human on the planet, because yeah, you do need those points of connection with others and being able to like get that empathy and validation, and also to give it, like it feels good, right, to have it go both ways.
absolutely. Yeah. So, like, setting ourselves up for success by choosing who we surround ourselves with so that we not only have a network when we experience challenging times, but we can also help other people when they're experiencing challenging times. I love it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's great. So I wanted to ask here, if you could choose one, what has been one of your biggest challenges on the bike so far? This can be physical or mental, up to you.
I would say probably not comparing myself to others, and being able to feel okay about myself if I walk away from something and I don't do something, because I think you set these like expectations and you set these goals for yourself, which is great, right? It's super productive. It's a way to progress in the sport. But if you, for whatever reason, don't meet those goals or those expectations, then um, it can be really hard to like stay positive and to feel good about yourself. And so I'd say that's probably like the biggest challenge for me, is being able to like overcome those comparisons and maybe not reaching my goals, and then trying to stay compassionate towards myself.
Hmm. Yeah, it can be tricky, can't it? And how do you go then about setting yourself goals that are, fun to go after, they excite you, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
like so far out of your wheelhouse that you just feel stressed and anxious about them?
Yeah, so, if you've ever kind of done goal setting, then I guess there's like the SMART acronym. So they
Yep.
have to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. And so when you look at all those things, then you can kind of work to set yourself goals that are more likely to get achieved. And I think for me, a lot of my goals revolve around things that I have control over. And that's really important because, and that's why none of my goals are ever results based, say for racing or whatever, because you have no control over who else is going to show up at the race. And um, I think for me, the goals are about personal growth and being able to come away from a ride or a race, even if things went wrong, and being able to sit back and to be like, this is what I learned from that. And also being able to sit back and feel good about myself and to be kind to myself, because I've spent so much of my life just beating myself up and berating myself. And I don't want mountain biking to be a part of that. And so that's always been a huge goal for me, is just being able to finish whatever it is I'm doing and just be kind to myself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's so cool to hear how you've almost like used this energy from all those years of, operating in a state that you currently don't want to be in. And you're now
Mm.
so conscious to be like, I'm going to keep this fun. I'm going to make sure I'm focusing on the positives and keep enjoying this. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it really gets exhausting just beating yourself up all the time and feeling like you're not good enough. And so, yeah, you kind of just get to a point where you're like, okay, let's just do this differently now. And
Mm,
it's hard. It's not always, I still have bad days and I still have times where I'm really, really hard on myself, but at least I have the awareness now to kind of step out of that and be like, don't do the thing,
yeah.
and to like think about it differently. So,
Totally. And I think, that's the cool thing these days and about, having more and more conversations like this about mindset and mental health in mountain sports and just in life in general is it raises the general awareness to a
hmm.
point where it's like, okay, I'm starting to feel this. I'm starting to go down that negative track. I'm going to use one of these tools to try and get myself back on track. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of like why I feel like this is important because a lot of the things that I say, I know that people are going to hear and be like, "Oh my God, me too." Like that happens to me all the time and like people think it's normal and not just normal, but they think it's okay to talk to themselves that way. And it's not okay, Like that's not going to help you progress in the sport. It's not going to help you enjoy the sport. You're not going to keep coming back to a sport where you're constantly, making yourself feel terrible. And so just being able to like, yeah, have these conversations and make people aware that like they don't that like that's not a healthy mindset and that they can actually do things to change that, and it will ultimately like improve not only their performance but also like, their life in general, because so many of these skills are transferable, right?
Yeah, yeah, such a good point. And, I couldn't agree more. Disrespecting ourselves is just as bad as
Mm,
disrespecting someone else. And,
yeah.
so many people don't realize the importance or how powerful their own internal dialogue and self-talk is. But for
Mm.
better or for worse, it's one of the, most powerful things that does influence our feelings and then our actions, right?
Yeah, I think it's something that comes up all the time, and I'm always like, why do we think it's okay to talk to ourselves like this? But we'd never say some of the things that we say to ourselves to our friends.
Mm,
Like if a friend crashes on their bike and, we're not going to go over to them and be like, dude, you should probably sell your bike, like you're the worst. Like, no, that would be, and it's not, and you don't even think that, right? Like you're not
mm,
even thinking that. You're just like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. Like, wow,
yeah.
this is like probably like they're probably feeling like pretty rattled right now. And so it's like, why is it so easy to be compassionate towards others, but then we find it so hard to apply that same compassion to ourselves. And it's almost like we hold ourselves to these ridiculously high standards that we don't hold anyone else to.
Yeah, and it's crazy when we voice it like that and talk about it. Hey, and it kind of goes back to your point before about sometimes voicing some of your internal dialogue out loud to
Mm,
almost give it an audience and be like, oh, wait, what I'm telling myself is not okay. Often it will go unnoticed if it's in our own head, there's no audience there. But saying it
yeah.
out loud can be a really powerful way of just being like, wait a minute, what am I talking about?
Yeah, and like to have the reflection and be like, I'm actually being really cruel to myself. Like nobody deserves that. And then again, it comes back to, yeah, the self-compassion and understanding that you're human and humans make mistakes, and mistakes should actually be celebrated because that's how we learn. And, perfection's boring. So
Yeah, you got it. We win and we learn, right?
like all the good stories start from, mistakes or like faults that we've made. And
Exactly. Yeah. So I think having the courage to go out and make mistakes is number one, right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So looking ahead to 2023 or the rest of 2023 for you, have you got any, races in mind or cool projects you're working on?
Um, yeah, definitely like another full summer of racing. A lot of the Canadian enduros I'll be doing, and also just trying to be a part of that series and trying to help more people get stoked on racing, particularly women. So going to be like, well, I'm a rider's rep for the series, and so I'll be leading pre-rides and going over like tactic and some like mental strategies as well during these races, and just trying to like keep the stoke alive too, and having good vibes and stuff like that. So I'll be heavily involved in that this summer, and then I'll be doing a lot of the downhill races as well in BC, and mostly also just trying to finish my practicum and get my hours done so that I can become fully certified and get my be like an actual licensed counselor. So that's big on the list because I've been working towards that for quite a long time. But yeah, just maybe doing some really big days on the bike as well, because I just love big days. And yeah, maybe trying to go back for the North Shore Triple Crown, because I tried to do it and then I hit my head and had to
Oh
bow
no.
out.
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, I go back and do that, and yeah, just kind of have some fun adventures with friends, and yeah, have some good
Fantastic.
memories.
Sounds like such an awesome, like jam-packed summer full of
Mhm.
adventures. I'm curious, did you manage to get a place in the Pemberton Enduro?
No, I didn't. I did do it last year and it was
Okay.
super fun, but it's going to be the same weekend as the Vetter
Okay.
Enduro
That's a tough choice, isn't it? Because
with the
Vetter is a
CEO.
super fun mountain.
Yeah, and I've never ridden Vetter before, so it was a bit of a it was a hard. I mean, I could actually do two. I could do them both and do the Pemby Enduro on the Saturday, but then I'd be racing Vetter blind as well because I wouldn't have the practice day. But I feel like that would be a big, and then the Squamish Enduro is the weekend after.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I might, I'll probably just do the Vetter one and then do the Squamish Enduro. And then I think Harper is the weekend after that. So that's like 3 weekends in a row
Yeah. Sounds
of
like
racing.
you've picked your battles wisely. 3 races in 3 weeks is probably enough. You're going to
Yeah.
absolutely love Veta. There's some great trails out there and great people as well. I'm curious though, I managed to get a place in the Pemberton Enduro. It's going to be my first year. And I know
Okay.
the course is mostly blind. You don't really know where you're going until you start
Yeah.
pedaling. So if you could give me one bit of advice for that race, what would it be?
Oh, I guess just like take it just take it stage by stage and try not to think about the whole day, and because it can be really overwhelming, I think, with any enduro if you start to like think about the whole day and you're like, oh my god, this is such a big day, I've got so much ahead of me. Just focus on one thing at a time. Chatting with people on the climbs, keeping it social, keeping it fun. Blind racing is, you're kind of dialing it back to like 70% because especially if you don't really know Pemberton that well, it's just you can't just pin it out of the gate because there's you got to be ready for what's coming, and like trail scanning is a really big one. So just like eyes up as far as you can and trying to be proactive instead of reactive. But
Hmm.
yeah, just try and have fun because that's like the Pemby Enduro vibe is just it's just a great time. It's super fun, and the vibes are really good. I remember last year, um, the first stage, someone blew through the tape at one of the trail junctions. And so I think most of the girls in my category ended up actually riding the wrong trail instead of the race trail. And
There you
so
go. I hope it was faster.
that was an interesting start to the race because I was like, oh, it looks like we didn't get a time for the first
Oh
stage.
no.
And but they ended up scratching the stage from the results. But yeah, I think also just being early in the season as well, like just have fun. Yeah.
Hmm. Great advice. Yeah, I'm super excited for it right now, but I'm sure there will be at least one time during that day when I, start feeling the race nerves or something like that. So I'm gonna think back to this advice. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I hope it goes
And I wanted,
well.
yeah, thanks. And likewise with your races, I can't wait to follow along. So I know you kind of rose to mountain bike stardom after the Pink Bike Academy there, and you've been lucky enough to team up with some really good partners for this season. Who are they? Who are you riding for?
Yeah, so it's my second year being on the Corsa Cycles Enduro team. So that's run by, yeah, Corsa Dunbar Cycles, which is a local bike shop here in Squamish. And then also for riding for Ride NF, they're based out of North Vancouver, as I'm sure you've probably heard of them, seen their
Absolutely.
kit,
Best pants in the biz.
yeah,
Yeah.
seen their kit at the dumpsters there at Seymour. And One Up Components as well is a, yeah, Squamish-based brand, and they've been on board with us for last year as well. So yeah, it's been really great having support from those brands.
Yeah, that's so great. And what's your weapon of choice? What bike are you riding this season?
This season I'm on a Juliana, so I'm
Oh,
on
that's
the Rubion mullet, which, yeah, is pretty sweet. So it's definitely a fun bike, and yeah, it's been a little bit to get used to again after being on a high pivot and going back to single pivot. So it's taken a little bit, but hopefully I can get back out there once the trails melt and feel a bit feel a bit more confident on it too.
absolutely. Yeah, I think we're all dying to get back out there and back on the trails. I wanted to ask here, as we wind down, is there anyone that you look up to in the mountain biking world and why?
Um, yeah, definitely Jamie, as I said before, my coach, Jamie Hill, just lots of lessons there that have been pretty invaluable, and just having her as a mentor has been pretty incredible. A lot of my friends, just my riding partners, like my teammate Ellie, um, just yeah, I really get inspired by my friends and by their energy, and I think having good riding partners is probably the most motivating thing for me in the sport. So,
Totally. Yeah. Nothing better than being surrounded by other stoked individuals, right?
hmm
I love it. So when you're not in between the tape racing, what does a perfect ride look like for you these days? Tough question, I know.
yeah, perfect ride. Either either like if it's summer, then like late afternoon, like early evening, diamond headlaps, shuttles with the crew. Those are pretty fun. Or if I was to have like perfect day, it would be like a 60K ride over like 2,000 meters of just riding some of the best trails around, and then just absolutely bonking by the end of it and being unable to move for the rest of the night. It's,
I love it.
yeah.
Such a great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best thing is you don't even have to leave Squamish for that, do you? Right
No,
from your doorstep back to it. Yeah.
exactly.
I love it. We've talked about lots in this conversation, and I've got so much out of it, especially kind of drawing on your experience with the counseling and then relating that to mountain biking. I've found it so useful. But I'm curious if there's one thing you hope listeners remember from this conversation, what would it be?
Um, I think probably just that, you know, we've talked a lot about these negative thoughts and the intrusive thoughts and the self-talk, and like you don't have to let it consume you. There are things you can do to reframe the way that you think, and to, have a bit more positivity in your life, especially in sports, and to just keep it fun and don't take it too seriously, because at the end of the day it's just mountain biking, and that's the reason we got into it. That's the reason we continue to do it, is because it's fun, and we like hanging out with our friends. We like being in nature, and whether or not you like ride a certain feature, send a certain jump, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is the smile on your face at the end of the ride, the high fives, and the stoke. Like, yeah, that's what it's all about. So
Absolutely. Wow. What a great note to finish this conversation on. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute blast here having you on the show today and picking your brains. I hope the questions weren't too tough and you enjoyed it as well.
yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, happy to chat anytime about this kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Uh, where can people find you and follow along online if they're curious for, checking out some of your mental health clinics or watching your adventures this race season?
Yeah, so I post a lot of what I do, both with racing and with mental health, just through my social media, which is at Torgalore, with two R's. And yeah, I post a lot of stuff about my seminars and things that I do within the community on there too. So yeah, if you want to follow along or connect or even shoot me a DM, and if you have questions about anything that was spoken about, then yeah, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for being such an open and, positive part of the mountain bike community. I love it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks again for having me.
What's up, guys? Just one last thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics, particular episodes you enjoyed, and even about any guests that you'd like to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at the_mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very, very close to my heart. So I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. Much love to you all for taking the time to listen. See you next time.